Hello, School Transportation Nation. Welcome back to the podcast. It's Tony Corpin, publisher and president, with you today. This episode is brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software. With me is Mr. Ryan Gray. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you very much, Tony. Nation, always great to be with you.
All right. Also joining us is the always fabulous Taylor Ekbatani, fresh off of maternity leave. She's got a great interview coming up with Mitzii Smith, who's the Assistant Director of Transportation for Maine School Administrative District 6, a Maine Safety Specialist. She's also President-elect of the Maine Association for Pupil Transportation and a 2024 STN Rising Star. So look forward to that conversation in just a little bit. But Ryan, man, the news is ablaze with lots of discussions. Leading the headlines on a daily basis is newly minted President Trump. His administration is reversing federal programs, funding freezes. Everybody's freaking out. And then there was some other stuff happening in terms of, walking it back, federal judge. They're clarifying what it all means. You want to break it down? How does this impact school transportation, Ryan?
Sure. So as a lot of presidents do when they come into office, they want to take a close look at a lot of the programs. Certainly, basically every president, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican, they look to undo a lot of what their predecessor did from the other party. President Trump has made it no secret what his agenda is going forward, and a lot of targeting of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. There's been a lot of talk, obviously, since the campaign last year and even before that. So really threw folks for a loop on last Monday when his administration announced just across the board funding freezes for basically all federal programs pending a review. That just set off a wildfire of speculation and concern, anxiety. Very quickly, a federal judge, as you mentioned, Tony, stepped in and froze that potential freeze, so halted that. And then the following day, the Trump administration walked a lot of that back. And they had said after they announced, or when they announced the funding freeze, that some of these programs would only be halted for a day or two. But I obtained the report, Tony, or the breakdown.
Because that is long, right?
It was 50 pages. I mean, it basically touched every single department. And in terms of your question, Tony, how does this impact student transportation and student transporters? Well, the first, low hanging fruit, I guess, that's obvious to everybody is the EPA. We know that the Trump administration has targeted EPA potentially, along with some other departments, of eventually maybe being axed. Now, again, that would take a lot of work, and there's a big difference between what is said on the campaign trail and what happens in actuality. Now, that's for most presidential nominees or elected, and certainly President Trump has shown that he is not your run-of-the-mill politician. So he has already, in a wide variety of other things, made good on his promises already. But certainly, in terms of EPA Clean School Bus Program, that sent, like I was mentioning earlier, a lot of people into a tizzy. Talked to a lot of folks last week. WRI and their electric school bus initiative, they were trying to figure out what was happening. CalSTART, I was talking with a few transportation folks. We know that a lobby is now being developed. And that's with school bus OEMs and even contractors. So now with the walking back of these halts, so the programs are moving forward, but there's a caveat even to that, Tony. The Trump administration has said that they still want to take a close look at any program that has that DEI element, quote unquote woke programs. Now, does that include EPA Clean School Bus? Because we know that a big priority is the low income and disadvantaged areas. Does that fall under the woke category? Smarter people than I can weigh in on that, but certainly it just indicates the anxiety, and that school districts, school officials, states, they are now wondering, what does this mean to our programs? Department of Education is also in there, obviously. Something that jumped out to me was Title I funds. Title I funds obviously are used for a lot of transportation nationwide. There's Head Start in there. Again, 50 pages of programs that are listed out there that initially the Trump administration wanted to halt. So there's a lot going on out there in terms of again, those funding programs. We're trying to get more information on, is this lobby moving forward? Because certainly there is a lot of fear. We're just a little bit over halfway through the Clean School Bus program. And I remember a couple of years ago, I've mentioned this before, that when the House went into GOP control 2.5 years ago at this point, I reached out to EPA and said, what does this mean? Does this mean anything? Because there was some conjecture at the time, the House would want to take a look at the Clean School Bus program amongst other programs. And EPA at the time told me, it's already a law that's been enacted. The funds are already going out there. It would basically take an act of God to change it. But, certainly things have changed. President Trump is a different political animal, to say the least. So certainly time will tell. Again, we always seem to be saying that. There's so much that, as we're going in real time, a lot still needs to be figured out. But certainly there's some folks that are worried about Clean School Bus. And another program, by the way, that was on that list was the EPA DERA program. So that's obviously going to concern a lot of folks out there.
Yeah, I was listening to the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, and she obviously is on the stand speaking almost every day about what's going on with President Trump and kind of their agenda and what they're doing and clarifying. And definitely she was very vocal about the Green New Deal and how they felt like it was a scam. And, does the Green School Bus program, basically the Clean School Bus program from the EPA, fall under that window? To me, that sounds like it would, amongst many other programs. Not sure DERA falls into that, but I guess it's all, it's really what they deem it to be. So we'll see what gets walked back, right?
And there's been a lot of congressional support for DERA over the years, but even up until a couple of years ago, I remember in an NSTA midwinter meeting that we went to last year, not the one that recently you went to, but the one last year in San Diego, Becky Weber, who I reached out to about this lobby, and I hadn't heard back yet, because again, I think everything is just happening in real time, and there's really nothing to say yet. Just as we've heard through the grapevine that this is afoot. But she had mentioned at the time that even DERA, they were looking at trying to drum up continued school bus contractor lobby for that, because there was, over the last decade or more of the DERA Act, like I said, that has been basically reauthorized every year. But going forward, especially as we were moving more to zero emissions, there's been congressional members that have questioned, like, do we need that anymore? We're talking about, you have diesel in there. So again, the Diesel Emission Reduction Act, diesel, as we've talked a lot about, has become a bad word, despite it being 90% cleaner than it was 10, 15 years ago, through all the regulation that largely EPA has pushed. But, certainly the California Air Resources Board has had a very big hand in that as well. Yeah, I mean, it's when we're talking green school buses, zero emission school buses, there's propane out there. We've talked about that. And, being Bluebird being the one-stop shop now really for that's available. Natural gas has waned, but diesel renewable diesel, certainly it makes a lot of sense, but there's a lot that play there. Renewable diesel only makes sense in those 4 states that have the low carbon fuel standard: California, Oregon, Washington, and most recently New Mexico. So certainly we're going to be trying to clear the air as much as we can in March at STN EXPO East. We have on the schedule Joe and Noddy from the folks that put on the ACT Expo. Of course, STN is a media sponsor of that. That's held every spring, so that's going to be coming up in late April. But Joe has become a good friend of ours. The whole group over there that produces that conference. So he's going to be coming in March in Charlotte and trying to, like I said, clear the air as much as we can. They're on top of it. He's got his thumb on the pulse. So we'll see what the next basically month and a half brings in terms of clarity.
Yeah, I know we got a press release, or there was a story you had sent me regarding New York State and kind of the burden to the taxpayers with the current mandate to go all electric over the next 10 years in terms of their school buses. And right, consider that New York has the largest fleet in the states, right? There's about 50,000 school buses, right, roughly in the state of New York, which that is, I mean, at least 10%, maybe more, 12% of the overall fleet volume in the US. So that is a big gauntlet to try to go through to get everything electric. And as we've discussed, one size does not fit all, but under the current mandate, which we'll see where it lands at a state level, the burden's going to fall on the taxpayer in New York. So very curious how that's going to unfold. We've been prognosticating, talking. Is it realistic? Is it just political posturing? Is this actually going to come to fruition? But, consider that school buses don't normally get federal funding. The Clean School Bus Act was kind of like we had predicted, maybe a once in a lifetime opportunity based on the administration. Who knows 4 years from now, if Trump, when he's out of office, who takes office and what's that next administration's iteration. But for now, I think we're probably under the assumption that there's going to be a deceleration in funding, if not a clawback in funding at the federal level, which would leave the states to make the decision, which was what it would be in the past, right? But the question then lies, do people fall back into that same behavior and say, okay, well, this funding's gone. We're going back to buying our tried and true diesel products. I know we heard at STN Expo last year, really renewed interest in the diesel solutions specifically, and obviously with providers like Cummins, Detroit Diesel, which Roush Cleantech on the propane engine side, also gasoline engines, right? They're moving towards these new GHG regulations, regardless if they get rolled back or not. The R&D and the engineering is already in place. They're not going to walk it back, right? They've already made the investment. They're going to pass the cost along to the end user, the fleets, and they're going to have to pay a bigger price because these guys have carried the burden. Regardless if the wind is blowing which way, they've made the decision to move forward with these new emission standards. So we'll see how it plays out, Ryan, but it's very interesting, the whole landscape of the market in energy, power solutions, constant evolution. I'm also curious on the trucking side of the business. They had really aggressive projections of adoption, and we really haven't seen that come to fruition. And the trucking industry really drives a lot of the R&D in the school bus industry, obviously, because there's alignment between Daimler Trucks, International Motors, and their brands, Thomas Built Buses and IC Bus, respectively. So we do hear about technology emerging inside the cabins, a lot of integration of digital dashes, other tech, matriculating through the product portfolio. So still really interested in seeing how the new Thomas Built Buses C2 next generation vehicle is going to look, feel with that drivetrain axle from Accelera. So that's really going to be interesting to see how others come forward with product innovations to support maybe a decreasing volume of electric adoption. So the time will tell on that, and we'll see how it plays out, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, what we're really talking about is free market. Right. And that's what has been really the driving this conversation that we've been having for the last several years, Tony, and certainly over the past year and since the summer, when really the entire marketplace was wondering, is it going to be former vice president at this point, Kamala Harris? Is it going to be former president at the time, Donald Trump? Who's going to come in? If it was going to go the Democrat way, we figured it was going to probably be at least the status quo, or if not more funding going toward green solutions. We knew that if Trump won, it was likely going to be a scale back, drill baby drill, more of an emphasis on the natural resources that we have, both with petroleum and natural gas. And I remember comments being made during that session that you were talking about, Tony. I was intimately involved with that. I helped pull that together, and it took a lot of time to pull that together. Several comments were made about competition really being the ultimate driver for price, because that's what everybody wants to know ultimately. How much it costs $400,000 for a large electric school bus, give or take, maybe even more. Then you have the infrastructure costs, and what's going to bring down the price. And there was a lot of conjecture that the EPA Clean School Bus Program and other programs have artificially increased the price when we've been hearing about, batteries are getting cheaper. The technology is getting cheaper. Well, how come the buses are so expensive? And essentially, a couple of the panelists said, "Hey, the Clean School Bus Program, you're giving free money out, and we mentioned that before. That's going to inflate the prices." And what we found, and what EPA found very quickly, was that the money they had allocated was not going to cover the full price of a lot of these new electric school buses, especially. And they, not even a year into the program, they said, "Time out. We're now looking at this as covering the incremental cost," right? Which really, makes sense. But everyone was looking at this as free money, as people often do, especially when the feds start, having these incentive programs or these stimulus programs, which, got us into the whole issue with a big reason behind the inflation. But that's a whole another discussion for another time. But and that's essentially what the Empire Center for Public Policy in New York said in this report issued on January 26th, where they're looking at that New York State mandate of 2027 is when school districts are supposed to start purchasing electric school buses as a new purchase. The new purchases have to be zero emissions or electric. 2035, they're supposed to have their entire fleet electric. Now, there were some extensions in there, but the Empire Center for Public Policy has been obviously following this program very closely. We had a group from NYSERDA on the podcast late last year, where they were talking about the funding and everything. And I was asking them, how is this going to happen? And essentially, this report came out and said, it's going to cost $9 billion over the next 10 years to meet this mandate.
That's a big number. Big number, Ryan. Yeah.
That's similar to numbers that we talked about. Remember when we were looking at it before NYSERDA came on, I was kind of trying to do the math and saying, okay, 50,000 school buses. According to WRI, there's about 200 that have been delivered or in operation. I checked with NIAP, the New York Association for Pupil Transportation. They said it's actually more about like 100 that are in operation. So 100 out of 50,000 school buses are in operation as electric vehicles. So you're talking about, another 100, according to WRI, have been delivered or soon will be. So you're talking, 49,800 school buses need to be replaced in the next 10 years and need to be fully electric. When you have, the typical or average large school bus being $400,000 or more. So there's about, of that 50,000, there's about 30,000 large school buses. About 20,000 are that type A, quote unquote, van is how they refer to it in New York, but it's a type A school bus. So, essentially, I even wonder if the $9 billion might be low. And, we know that through that program that NYSERDA is administering through that Environmental Bond Act, Governor Kathy Hochul, that this has been a very big initiative for her. They have allocated not even half that $9 billion, $4.2 billion. So where's that additional money going to come from? Obviously, there's been hope that, and NYSERDA mentioned this, that there's the EPA Clean School Bus program, where we were just talking about that, and all that's kind of up in the air now. And then there are other state programs in addition to this Environmental Bond Act. So it's not just that there's only $4.2 billion, only quote unquote, for electric school buses, but still. There is bringing to light a lot of the things that we talked about. It doesn't even account for the number of school districts that need major electric power upgrades at their yards. And we've discussed that. There was actually a paper in October issued by the New York State Education Department, and they surveyed every single school district in the state, 681 school districts. Well, 86% responded. And they found that of that 86%, 42% said they anticipate electrical upgrades. And what the Empire Center for Public Policy found was that can range from the hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars. And that's largely, now there's some grant programs, but a lot of that burden falls on the school district. So meanwhile, that same survey from the State Department, 39% answered TBD, so didn't even know. They had not done a study yet. So almost 40% don't even know. 42%, slightly more, said yes, they absolutely going to need those upgrades. 17% said not applicable. I'm not quite sure what that means. And 3% said no. So you're probably talking some of your largest school districts with that. So that just leads to a lot more questions we've been asking that we don't have a lot of answers to yet. And again, it comes back to the cost and the pricing. How is this tenable long term? And that's not even mentioning what's going on with the California Air Resources Board. We know that they ended the process of seeking additional waivers for their advanced clean fleets rule because they knew that it was going to be so difficult with the new Trump administration. So we have a dozen other states that were following that. And granted, the advanced clean fleets rule is separate from the California specific school bus mandate, but there's an impact to these other states. So coming back around full circle, Tony, what you were talking about with allocation of fuels from the OEMs in different states, we originally were hearing from the OEMs, a pullback in a lot of these CARB states and like New York and other places, that diesel just would not go into those markets. Or if they did, they would be drastically reduced compared to their traditional numbers. Well, now we're starting to sense that might be changing. And we already saw late last year, Daimler Trucks North America, the owner of Thomas Built Buses, they infused an additional $285 million investment, I think, in Detroit diesel. So they're obviously, opening up more production there. What does that mean for school bus? Certainly, Detroit diesel goes into a lot of trucks as well. But we're starting to sense a sea change here, where there is a world where diesel can come back, and that was really the direction, the point of that panel that you discussed last year in Reno. Now, always getting the OEMs on stage and what they can talk about publicly versus privately, and legal involved and regulatory. Sometimes, it's hard to get very direct answers, but certainly that was what I told everyone last year. And, at that point, we just didn't know who was going to be in the White House. Well, now we do. And I think we are starting, while there still has a lot of answers that we need, we're starting to get a little bit more clarity. And with that clarity, that's where we're seeing that anxiety from a lot of folks.
Yeah. And I mean, if you really look at the bus production and what's out in the field deployed, right? If we had roughly 3,000 electric school buses last year, roughly 3,000 the year before, and then maybe some incremental, I mean, at most, there's maybe 7,000 on the road, tops. What do you think?
Yeah, I think 7,000 to 8,000. And a lot of those are still, in terms of operation, that's a whole nother thing. I mean, so these buses might have been delivered, but they might not be in operation yet for the reasons that, like I discussed earlier with the New York State report that found that a lot of these districts don't have the power to operate these buses or the infrastructure. And we know that, and that's not just in New York State, that's happening everywhere. We've been hearing those stories for years. And, California, where it's still 18 months out from getting power from the electrical company. So it's, the challenges, the operational challenges still are plentiful. And you mentioned also the from the production standpoint, still there's only so much production. We're talking about on the best year, 45,000, 40,000 school buses, and there have been those additional factories created, but still the OEMs can only produce so much. And now we have Lion, it's essentially exited, and there's a auction. So basically the company is going to be going up for sale. Deloitte Touche is managing that whole, quote unquote bankruptcy proceedings. And I know Lion folks say they don't like to use that term, but that we know that company, it's essentially a skeleton of itself. It's really only, the top executives in Quebec that remain. So we know that starting here in about a week's time, or actually this week, the auction proceedings start. So the bids start going out. And, from what I'm looking at, it looks like by early March, we might know who is the new owner of Lion, and then what happens. But we know, take off those, that number of school buses, and someone's going to have to pick up the slack. But where does that come from, especially when you're looking at what happens with Clean School Bus and what happens in these other states?
Yeah, and the opposite side of that is the fallout, right? Who's going to maintain those buses? How are you going to get parts for those buses? Who's going to support those buses? Do they become basically 33,000 pound paperweights, right? Is it literally that the government has made this massive investment and now it becomes this more charged political situation that, hey, all this money went to your industry and look what you did with it. Look what happened.
Yeah.
And that is like literally the linchpin to really unravel everything really quick. And I guarantee you there's posturing that's going to happen regarding this. If it hasn't happened today, mark my words, downstream, this is going to come out. I know we're working on a story about Lion specifically and what the impact and fallout is to customers, which if you own a Lion bus and you listen to this podcast, stay tuned. We got lots more for you. So there's a lot of info out there.
Reach out to us too if you own Lion buses. I mean, we're talking to customers out there, but certainly if you're a Lion bus owner, you've already received. I mean, the company started sending out email notifications late last year to all their customers. I mean, this is not like something that just happened, or if you have a Lion bus, this is the first time you're hearing about it. But certainly there have been challenges because of the model. Lion was just so different in their model than any other traditional school bus manufacturer with dealers. But that has really led to a lot of issues in terms of those, how do we get the warranties serviced? And we know First Student has stepped up and they've said that they're going to provide service, of course, at a fee to not just their customers and where they own Lion buses, but to any school district. So we're starting to see, obviously, some of that come to fruition, but there's a lot of, whether it be a school district or a contractor, or we see this electrification as a service that has become so popular in a lot of places, they're left kind of holding the bag. So, and again, it comes back to, that opens up some opportunity with the other OEMs, but how much can they even address that? And not like we're talking, tens of thousands of buses a year. But still, you look at existing orders and you look at production capacity, that's a very big thing. And like I mentioned, we are seeing more investment going into these electric school bus facilities, but it's going to take time. They have to ramp up. So certainly, yeah, like you said, stay tuned.
All right, guys, don't forget STN EXPO East in Charlotte's coming up real soon, March 20th through the 25th. Lock in our early bird rate. Save $100 on your registration. That ends on Valentine's Day. Don't forget that too for your honey out there. That'd be February 14th. Make sure you mark the calendar, lock in, come to STN EXPO East in Charlotte. We got a great agenda of classes, networking, our transportation director summit, which has got a great leadership experience with Scott Welly. He's going to help you change your game up, elevate your leadership. He's also our keynote speaker, which is sponsored by Thomas Built Buses, which is great. So you guys can look forward to hearing from Scott, as well as we've got our Bus Technology Summit and Green Bus Summit, which we're going to be getting product demos from lots of key manufacturers on a variety of different tech, safety equipment. OEMs are going to be talking about energy, power options, all the trends that you guys need to know about. So make sure you go check out that agenda, stnexpo.com/east for all the details. All right, we got a quick message coming up, and we've got a great interview with Taylor and Mitzii in just a second. Hey guys, what do software, hardware, and safety have in common? One word: TransFinder. At the STN Expo in Reno, TransFinder won 3 Innovation Choice Awards, voted on by STN Expo attendees for best software, best hardware, best safety technology. TransFinder's Route Finder plus routing solution and apps, Stop Finder and Wayfinder, are well known in the industry. Not everyone realizes TransFinder provides hardware like card readers, tablets, and mounts. And as for safety, Patrol Finder for schools is TransFinder's latest solution, designed to make buses and campuses safer. TransFinder's president and CEO, Antonio Civitella, said the recognition means so much because it's voted on by STN Expo attendees. Civitella said, "We know a lot is riding on TransFinder because a lot is riding on those yellow buses that travel through our communities. TransFinder must continue to innovate as more is being expected of transportation departments from district leadership as well as parents." Learn more at transfinder.com. That's transfinder.com.
Hello, nation. Taylor Ekbatani here. I am back with another 2024 Rising Superstar. So this week we have Mitzii Smith, the Assistant Director of Transportation for Maine School Administrative District 6. Welcome, Mitzii, to the podcast stage.
Thank you for having me.
So another rising superstar. You guys were profiled in the November issue, and then there was online profiles posted throughout the rest of the year. So great to have you on the podcast, and really excited to dive into who Mitzii is.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
So can you tell our listeners a little about you? You know, you've been in the industry for 20 years now, and I know you kind of got started as a school bus driver. So kind of how a lot of people grow up into the industry, but kind of give the listeners a little flavor into you.
Sure. So this is my 21st year at Bonnie Eagle Transportation. I started when my oldest was starting kindergarten. There was a sign at kindergarten registration that said, that this was a perfect job for parents of school-age children. So at the time, I kind of anticipated it being a part-time, temporary thing while my children were young. But 21 years later, now here I still am. So it's something that I've learned to love.
Mm-hmm. So I know they used to allow kids on the school bus with the driver, like your personal kids. Was that the case with you?
Yes, both my kids were able to be on my route through K through 7th grade. And so that was great. Some early mornings, they got used to getting up in the cold and trekking on the bus with mom. But it was ideal. It's a perfect position for a parent that wants to, be involved in school. We could go to all the school activities, drive for their sports trips, all those type of things. So it ended up being a perfect match for me.
That's awesome. And then you progressed, you started as a school bus driver and now you're assistant director. So how did that kind of happen?
Over the years, I did a lot of participation in the yellow classroom, which was going in and training on school bus safety at all the district classrooms pre-K through 12th grade, a program that our district offers. I did that for many years. And then really after my kids graduated from high school and I wasn't bogged down with school and sports and activities, I just decided that it was time to make the leap into coming into the office. And so it's been great. I've been in this role for 3 years now, and I'm loving it, loving every minute of it.
That's awesome. And I know, you're also doing a lot industry-wide. You became a Maine School Safety Specialist, and that's offered through the Department of Education. So can you tell me a little bit about that program, and why it's important to have transportation involved?
I think that, it's imperative to have transportation involved because in starting the Maine School Safety Specialist program, I just realized that transportation is present at every level of education, but it's not always included. So a lot of times we're included at the back side of it, or we're invited after decisions have been made. And I really just felt that it was important that we had a seat at the table when decisions about safety were being made. And it's really been important to have that voice for safety, for our district, for our state, and beyond that.
Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, you're serving on 2 standing committees with the National Association of Pupil Transportation, and you're working towards your professional certification as a director of pupil transportation, and you're president-elect of the Maine Association of Pupil Transportation. So you clearly keep yourself busy.
Very busy, and I love it. It's just, this has been something that I have a passion for. I want to be as involved as I can at every level, and it's just the opportunities have presented themselves, and I've been very fortunate to be able to take advantage of those opportunities as they've come up.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the Maine Association of Pupil Transportation, being that president-elect, what are some trends that you're seeing at the state level?
So I know that Maine is a smaller state, so we're trying to build our involvement as far as that goes. We're trying to be present on a bigger scale. That's why I'm very involved in the NAPT and just trying to bring those initiatives and things that we're working on federally to the state level, bring awareness to that. So I look forward to, and then my term begins in August. So I really look forward to partnering with the connections that I've made through NAPT and really just bringing some new trainings and new awareness to the state as a whole and in our industry.
And I know you're really involved in emotional intelligence, and so we're going to get into that in a minute. But speaking of Maine being a small state, you guys are one of the largest fleets in the state of Maine.
We are. MS 86, the Bonnie School District. We're a rural district in southern Maine, but we serve Buxton, Hollis, Leamington, and Standish and Fry Island. We have 6 elementary schools, 1 high school, 1 middle school, and we serve 2 counties, York and Cumberland County, spanning 182 square miles. So
wow,
we are small but mighty.
And that's like 5,000 miles a day, I want to say.
Roughly around 5,300 miles a day.
Okay.
We have 174 daily routes. We have a transportation team of 62. We have a fleet of 61.
Okay.
80% of that being propane, which we're very proud of.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to dive into that. So even with, these longer kind of routes and stuff, you're running propane. So can you talk me through your district's decision to go in that direction?
Certainly. So this isn't new to us. This has been something 20 years in the making. Dottie Muchmore was a former director here. She was passionate about bringing propane to the state of Maine. And we've really, over the last few years, gained a lot of momentum with initiatives for clean energy and different things that are available. It's a great fit for our district, the size that we are, the amount of miles that we travel. And we've had great luck with it. 2 years ago, we installed an 18,000 gallon propane tank, being the largest in the state, and we were able to get a delivery of renewable propane, which was fantastic. It was the first delivery north of Mississippi to come into this area. Unfortunately, logistics and the affordability of that, it's very hard to continue with those deliveries of the renewable propane, but we hope to in the future be able to do another delivery of the renewable again. With cold temperatures and things like that in Maine, propane just really made a lot of sense. We've had great success with buses warming up quickly. We've had great success with it all across the board.
That's good. So then what is your other 20% then? Is that diesel?
So we have diesel. We have a couple gasoline buses just because of range.
Mm-hmm.
We have some field trips that span the state or out of the state. And we do, at this point, the range on the buses is a little greater with gasoline buses. So we do have a couple of those for those instances.
Okay. But you said you've been running propane for 20 years or so?
This is 20 years, yes. So it's not it's not new to us. It's the push to expand our fleet to propane has been in recent years. That's what's enabled us to be at 80% now of our fleet being propane. But it's been a long journey, but it's shown to be very successful for us.
Mm-hmm. Have you guys looked at electric at all?
Of course, we've been part of those conversations. We've been watching all of the studies and seeing neighboring districts have successes and failures with that. So for us, we're pretty content with our decision to stick with propane, and it's just a good match for us.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit, and we mentioned it at the top, but something that you've really prioritized, and one of the reasons that kind of stood out to me when selecting you as a Rising Superstar was your work on emotional intelligence. And I kind of have a little note here, but I think it would be better if you took the reign and kind of talked about what that means, what you guys did, and how you're incorporating that into transportation.
Certainly. So about a year and a half ago, we had the opportunity to partner with Kelly Doyle Bailey. She was a former SEL specialist for the Maine Department of Education. She's now in the private sector. And she is an author. She writes books for children about some days I flip my lid, some nights I flip my lid, sometimes I breathe on purpose, some days I make mistakes. I saw her present last year at a conference, and it really just resonated to me because we, after COVID, had been dealing with driver shortages. We'd been dealing with we had a few accidents. We had a lot of things going on in our district, in our department, and we were trying to really find a way that we could bring our staff together, give them the tools that they needed to be successful. We always hear the term that, these kids are not the same as they were before COVID. Well, the same is to be said about drivers and monitors and staff in general. We all came back to a different world after COVID. So we really wanted to focus on pre-tripping yourself, not just your bus. Pre-trip yourself. How do you feel? What tools can we give you to be successful behind the wheel? So it's been an incredible collaboration. We've been able to present at a few conferences. We're presenting again at a director summit in March. So we've had great success with it. It's just really using the tools of emotional intelligence to make your staff feel valued, to let them know that their well-being is important to us, social awareness, conflict management, emotional regulation, all of those tools. And it's been incredible for our department, and we hope to continue with the work with Kelly Doyle Bailey.
I love that. So what does the training look like? Is she coming in, consistently, or as new drivers come on, are they getting the training? How does it kind of break down?
So Kelly came and she met with our staff as a whole. We had an open house. We discussed what we were working on, what our ideas were moving forward. And she met with our admin team on a weekly basis for a year. So we met with her. She gave us the tools that we needed, taught us about the brain science behind emotional intelligence, and taught us how to really take that and carry that ball to give the tools to our drivers. So we have incorporated that in our monthly trainings. We've incorporated that in some messaging. We put daily reminders up at times, just little tips and traits, like one being, check your backpack, and you carry all these things in your backpack, and maybe it's okay to take some of those things out of your backpack, whether it be finances or things that are going on at home that you don't necessarily need to take with you behind the wheel before you drive your students. So it's been incredible. The drivers have responded well to it. And it's just really, again, about putting value in your staff and letting them know that not only do we care about them pre-tripping and the safety of the bus and the students, but that their emotional intelligence and their emotional well-being is as valuable to us.
I love that. Pre-trip yourself before you get on the bus.
Pre-trip yourself.
I've never heard that term before or used in that phrase, and I really love that.
Yeah, it's been great. And we kind of came up with, that was the title of our presentation, was just to pre-trip yourself, because, you're just as important, and, you're expecting these drivers to deal with some very rough behavior at times, and often dysregulation isn't always successful if you meet it with dysregulation. So we want to give the drivers the tools to be successful.
Mm-hmm. What have you seen? You said your drivers have taken really positively to it. How is that transferred down to the student riders? How is having drivers who are kind of in tune with themselves and realizing, hey, I had a bad day yesterday, but that doesn't mean I have to have a bad day today. How does that trickle down to student behavior and student kind of attitude on the school bus?
I think it's helped because it's really given the drivers that minute to pause.
Mm-hmm.
They really take a moment before they react to the behavior. They take more time of, why is this student behaving this way? Not coming at it from a standpoint of, I want to get this student off the bus because they're behaving this way. It's more like, let's work with this student. What do they have going on in their life right now that may be making them behave that way or react to you that way? So I've had some drivers come in and just let me know that it's been very positive in the relationships that they form with their students and the trust level. And it's really been very positive.
That's great. And so this is something you're planning on continuing?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So like I said, we're presenting again at the Directors Summit in March, and that's going to be our first opportunity to really get the directors from the state of Maine together and try to talk to them a little bit about the work that we've been doing. And my hope is to carry it on to the state conference and then beyond that. So
okay.
It's an exciting venture.
So the Director Summit that you're talking about, that's a state initiative in Maine?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, our MAPT is partnering with the Department of Education to offer a director's week, a couple days, and we're going to get together and really talk about some state issues, and this is one of those issues.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, I didn't want to confuse people because I know we have our STN EXPO East in March. Yeah, yes. So just want to differentiate that.
Yes.
But you are going to that conference in March. As a Rising Superstar, you got free conference registration. So what prompted you to choose the one in March in Charlotte?
So this is my first STN conference. I'm excited to attend. I chose Charlotte in March. Just the timing was perfect. I'm in Maine, so obviously it's a quicker trip. I'm looking forward to the Directors Summit and meeting some directors from around the country. We're all dealing with similar issues, and I find that the networking opportunity and the opportunity to discuss the issues that we're all facing, it's really valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, we're excited to see you there and meet in person.
I'm excited.
But before we wrap up, I just want to touch base. We're technically recording this in January. So do you have any goals or, aspirations, anything you're working on with technology, anything, related to your department that you'd like to share kind of looking forward for this year?
So our department is always looking for ways to continue training. I think that it's imperative to really continue to elevate your staff and provide the trainings that you need. Technology is always at the cornerstone of that, trying to get real-time ridership, turn-by-turn navigation, all these things that everybody's looking for, and trying to see how that works with spotty Wi-Fi and things like that in the state of Maine. So we're continuing to work with those type of issues. I'm looking forward to seeing where the new technology takes us. And yeah, just like I said, providing that training that our drivers and staff need to be successful moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's important for sure. Well, thank you so much, Mitzii. I appreciate you jumping on the podcast and sharing your information. You can tell you're very, passionate about training and this type of learning for drivers. And I think it's really important to kind of spread that.
Thank you, Taylor. I appreciate it.
A special thanks to Ryan Gray, Taylor Ekpatani, and Mitzii for coming on the podcast. Great conversations. Appreciate you guys for being a part of our podcast. Also, special thanks to our sponsor, TransFinder. Make sure and thank them. Let them know you heard about them on the STN podcast. Tell them you appreciate them for sponsoring this podcast and bringing you this great content every week. Guys, don't forget, you can go on stnonline.com for a list news and analysis on the school transportation industry. We've always got you covered. News, information, interviews, thought leadership. That is what we do every day, and we love doing it. Guys, don't forget, listen to the podcast regularly. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to pods. Make sure you add us so it pops up on your phone or mobile device every time we come out. Every week, Nation, we're here for you. We love you. We'll see you next week.